All right, guys, we're going to welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nick here will be doing our 2024 preview and prediction for the Iowa Hawkeyes. Coaching staff still consists of Kirk Ferentz and Phil Parker. These guys have each been around since 1999. Obviously, Brian Ferentz finally departs as offensive coordinator, a move that wasn't made by his dad, but more the AD of the school, forcing Brian out. Tim Lester, who was Western Michigan's head coach, did pretty solid there for the Broncos from 2017 to 22, will step in as the OC. Second division crown in 3 years, scoring a combined 3 points in the big title games, Nick. Just insane stuff for them to be able to arrive there twice again in the last 3 years with an offense that's only putting up 15.4 points per game. You look at the numbers on screen, I mean, pretty much dead last in everything. This is a unit that has just been completely awful, Nick. It's really a loss of words of how bad they have been. You know, the scheme is just incredibly bland, a lack of creativity, obviously a lack of talent as well. But they used to be quite sound at running the football, and that's just something that they have not been great at the last couple of seasons. 115 yards per contest on the ground. They do have two solid backs, though, Le'Shawn Williams and Caleb Johnson. Williams was pretty efficient in their wins. Johnson didn't exactly break out as anticipated. Did showcase breakaway speed. He was beat up most of the year, though. 30-year player Jason Patterson barely saw the field, but did have two impressive games when given the opportunity. You look at the quarterback room, Cade McNamara, I certainly think that he complemented the Michigan run game well a couple years back when he was the starter. Was smart with the ball, good game manager. The ceiling seemed capped with him at quarterback for Michigan, and clearly that proved to be true. Seems like a solid fit for this offense, though, because I just think that there's more competentness, more talent here with McNamara. I don't say this is much of an upgrade. He got hurt in Game 5 of the year. Wasn't exactly lighting up the world regardless. But there's a good bit of turnover here. They added 2 QBs in the portal. 3 of them they lost. So they completely revamped this QB room. Brendan Sullivan coming over from Northwestern. He wasn't bad for them in a couple of games. Certainly showed some competitiveness. And then Jackson Stratton from Colorado State. 6'5", 210 coming out of high school. He was productive at that level as well. Nick, what do you make of this quarterback room that they really revamped and, running back room that's quite talented? They just haven't had great opportunities to showcase their talents, I wouldn't say.
This Iowa's offense, or lack thereof offense, continues to puzzle me as this team has won 10 games multiple times in the last couple of years, despite having no pulse on offense. In 2015, they won 12 games. In 2021, they won 10 games. 2019, they won 10 games. 2023, they won 10 games. Again, despite having no pulse on offense at all, they're also 6-2 during the COVID year. Just a really weird thing with Iowa, and I'm sure a lot of you video game heads out there who are going to be playing the new NCAA college football game are going to try and rebuild Iowa and give them a competent offense and see what you can do with that. I think Cade McNamara is, a solid quarterback for what this is. This is not going to be, plugging him in is not going to turn this offense around overnight, but I think he's stable and sturdy in the pocket, a good guy to kind of game manage and set up the run. Didn't look great, though, in his 5 games before the injury, right? 51% comp rate, 505 yards, 4 touchdowns, 3 picks, so not an incredible showing from him. Deacon Hill stepped in and was just not very good at all with 5 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. He moves on to Utah Tech, of all places. And now you have these 3 backs here who have some room to grow. I think Williams is a really solid back who could try to find some better success this year. 821 yards on the ground is a solid number, but only 1 touchdown, only 4.8 yards per attempt. Obviously, you want to see those numbers get a little bit higher. Caleb Johnson, 463 and 3 scores for him, while Patterson has 206 and 2 scores. So you want to see more production out of your running backs this year, and it certainly starts with the offensive line. Can they find success blocking, creating holes for these backs to try and find a little bit of success on the ground? They were 109th in the nation in rush yards per game, which is their best rank of the 4 ranks we have on screen by a good amount, but still, below 100th in the nation, and running the ball is not good enough if you're an Iowa fan.
Yeah, and obviously Ferentz, Brian, that is, was forced out. Not much coaching change has happened, and I figured when the change was made, I didn't think that much would change in terms of philosophy, and then Kirk pretty much confirmed it. That this is going to be pretty much the same style they roll with. Obviously I think, they're probably going to see maybe Brendan Sullivan get an opportunity at quarterback. This offensive scheme is just incredibly ancient, and it's not friendly for any quarterback. Doesn't matter who's under center, I don't believe, Nick. Good news for them, though, Luke Lachey at tight end. This guy is phenomenal. As always, they do continue to have saving graces at tight ends. This is an athletic player at 6'6", 253, can threaten the seams, smooth accelerator, then great separation at the top of his routes. Shows nice grip strength, works hard as an inline blocker, does need to improve his balance and ability to win versus physicality. The wide receiver group, they lose their top 2 pass catchers. The next 4 out of 5 in terms of production are back. Caleb Brown at 5'10", 197. They're thinking he can emerge as their top target. Seth Anderson, 6'1", 180, had a few receptions. They do have another tight end in Addison Odezinga. Ended up as second on the team in targets, showed great hands, and was a very good blocker. They have an ex-JUCO adding Caden Wetjen, who only had a few rush attempts, and was a special teams returner as well. Jerry Atbu, a redshirt freshman, will look to see some more time. The room only has a couple of scholarship players and a few freshmen. This is a team that I just call completely unserious about improving its skilled position group, Nick. They've done absolutely nothing at wide receiver. They have two great tight ends, and that's going to be just enough to help them win their 8, the 9, the 10 games. But unserious is really what I'm calling this offense.
I think it's a very fair way to put it because they are unserious about changing this offense. They really don't seem to care, and they're more than content by just dominating on the defensive side of the ball and eking out wins with special teams plays and defensive touchdowns, whatever you want to get. Luke Lachey is an incredible tight end. Only played in 3 games last year after injuries, had 131 yards receiving on 10 grabs in those 3 games, though. So look for him to stay fully healthy this year and be a big impact, potentially a red zone target as well. Addison Ostringa, the other tight end, 192 yards for him and 2 scores on 31 targets. Solid stats there. Obviously you want to see that production raise a little bit more, but 2 touchdowns for him is good numbers. Caleb Brown, 215 yards receiving and 1 score for him, your top returning receiver. And then Seth Anderson, 150 yards and 1 score on 11 targets. Solid production there at 13.6 yards per attempt, your top returning figure. In that regard, this offense is still going to be anemic. They're not going to really score a whole lot in terms of passing wise. They're going to really just try to find a way to run the ball and have Cade McNamara kind of be this game manager here and set things up.
Look at an offensive line. Obviously, they have a lot of heavy lifting to do in this scheme. Mason Richmond returns at left tackle after being flat out horrid, but did battle injury all year long. Logan Jones was a good run blocker at center. They do have Tyler Ellsbury, who's quite impressive in his appearances. They're going to look to find him a spot on the interior line. Connor Colby is probably going to be the best lineman overall. Does a great job in zone running. His right guard spot showcases agility and nice abilities to get through traffic. Pretty good at right tackle in Jennings Dunker. In terms of pass protection, I thought he was quite sound. Did allow 5 sacks. Just needs to find better consistency, I'd say, overall. And this unit has good depth with players like Bayou Stevens, who might even start at left guard. Nick DeJong, who has great versatility. He's been around for a couple of seasons. Offensive line, less than stellar. Over the last couple of seasons, the scheme doesn't help them, but, the zone running at times shows physicality. I think that they're well improved with some great experience this year on the offensive front. Now, obviously, how much will that allow on the stat sheet to change? I'm not really sure, but I think in terms of time possession and being able to convert on third downs, that's the things you look for. You got to nitpick when it comes to this offense. If they can succeed in those areas, they're going to be tough to beat, Nick. I just know that size and obviously development has certainly been not as great the past couple of seasons for this O-line, but I think the experience is going to be a plus this year.
The experience will certainly help with this O-line. They return a lot of veterans. The size has not been incredible in the development, like you alluded to. They haven't really been pumping out those talented tight end or offensive line pieces to the NFL. They still are pumping out lots of talented tight ends. They seem to have a ton of those out there in Iowa that are available for them. I think the offensive line will be just fine. I think this running back room's got another year of experience, 3 backs that can really find a way to hit the hole and grind on the ground. You have a bunch of returning starters on the offensive line that can really play together. The size is a little disappointing, but overall they're still a very strong and physical unit on the O-line.
Yeah, and looking at the verdict for this offense, moving on to Tim Lester, is pretty much the athletic director respecting Kirk's tenure, but at the same time firing his son for him. Kirk himself said the philosophy won't be much different, but I definitely think with this O-line and a better game manager under center with, I'd say, an elite duo at tight end will allow them to further establish drives, should be on the field more after ranking 107th in time of possession each of the last 2 seasons. And we don't really talk about special teams much usually, Nick, but Torrey Taylor moving on, that was probably their best offensive weapon in all seriousness for Iowa, so he's gone, and that's not great. I think this offense will be better overall, Nick, and I know it's hard to set the bar any lower, but obviously I certainly think that they will be better with the things I just mentioned. And again, what will it lead to on the stat sheet, really don't know, but I definitely think, again, time of possession and a couple more points probably per game are in store for Iowa, even though it's really hard to say.
It is certainly in store for Iowa, but it's difficult to say, right? This is an improved offense, but really how much of an improvement is this going to be, right? 15.4 points per game last year, 132 in the nation, 133 in yards per game in general. Those numbers will go up, I think, slightly, but it's really not going to be a whole lot. But we're going to talk about the defense in a second here, which is really going to be the saving grace, because that's kind of what it is at Iowa, right? Terrible offense, relying on good special teams play and relying on good defense, or fantastic defense, that is, over and over again. I think that's what you're going to get out of this team this year. Again, nothing's really changing at all. Same old Iowa.
Yeah, they do return 9 starters on this side of the ball. That's certainly important to note. They were 129th in third down offense, but they were 76th in place. So even though they're flat out awful at times, they're able to stay on the field and just be good enough to just keep field position in their favor. And like you said, now it leads us to the defense. And even though the offensive side of the ball is terrible, it really does play into the favor of the style they like to play. And that's why Kirk doesn't want to probably change it. Because when defense plays like this, and if Phil Parker coaches them as well as they do, there's no team that is as disciplined or as good at playing defense as I say the Iowa Hawkeyes. Fourth in points per game, fifth against the pass, seventh in total yards. They don't do anything in the portal. They only lost 2 guys, added nobody. Linebacker Nick Jackson's the only guy they've added over the last 2 years. We'll talk about him. They returned 8 starters. They only had 10 INTs this year, 75 tackles for loss. They just thrive on limiting big plays, stuffing the run. Only team to be in single digits in terms of 30-plus yard plays allowed, with only 9. And it starts with a defensive line. And, the interior gets back key components in Yaya Black, who was 6'5", 315, being a quality run defender, and even having 5 pass breakups. Has burst and power, along with, some nice length. Aaron Graves enters his 3rd year and is a big breakout candidate after being a better pass rusher than Black was. Depth is certainly a little iffy. Jeremiah Pittman wasn't very good last fall in his sophomore season. Luke Gaffney and Jeff Bowie, who have no experience, will be there. Defensive tackle might be in for a bit of regression. Defensive end, though, the department's in much better shape. Deontay Craig shows some nice power, but also impressive speed. He's a guy who plays hard. Ethan Herkett, on the other side, was a great run defender for them. Getting a go in the spring game was Max Llewellyn, a player that should be a key rotational piece. Brian Allen looked good as a freshman in week 1 last year, but ended up reserving his red shirt. Should really develop in terms of, technicalities. The thing about this defensive line is there's no real elite standout, but collectively a nice group with more experienced players stepping into bigger roles. There's no need to really worry about this defensive line, Nick. Even though the interior has limited experience, it doesn't matter. They just coach them so well here.
Not super worried about it. I think the rotational ability is going to make this unit strong and fantastic this year. Yes, they lose some tackles for loss and some sacks, but they have some solid players turning. Graves, 37 total tackles, 4.5 tackles for loss, 2.5 sacks for Graves. Solid numbers there. Deontay Craig, 54 total tackles, 5 tackles for loss, 3 sacks for him returning. Ethan Herkett, 52 total tackles, 6 tackles for loss, plus a pick for him. Solid numbers. Yaya Black, I think he's an exciting player. 51 total tackles, 5 tackles for loss, 3.5 sacks, and 5 pass breakups. Really gets a hands up on the line and can block the ball. Very functional. Move him around. You can play him on the right or left side. A good player, a good leader for this team. Is Jeremiah Pittman going to step up? He had 6 total tackles last year. What's he going to look like this year? Can he kind of develop into a better player? I think this unit has some solid pieces. It has some nice depth as well. It's not going to jump off the page at you with any crazy headliners, but a really solid interior that I think can still succeed.
And Deontay Craig's production dipped a little bit. In 22, he had 11 TFL and 7.5 sacks. He was putting up better numbers than first-rounder Lucas Van Ness, for example. So a lot of very good players that continue to come from this defensive line. And obviously, they do lose a couple of key pieces. Not too much to be worried about, though. You shift to the middle of this defense, and, what is a 4-2-5. Jay Higgins, you can read off his numbers in a minute, Nick. He's considered the nation's top backer. He was a high-volume tackler. Rarely missed, despite playing nearly 1,000 snaps. Was exceptional in coverage, was targeted a ton, but is a surefire wrap-up guy. Seemed to always make first contact on ball carriers, despite not having the greatest speed or strength. Another one of those guys who just has good fundamentals and good IQ for the game. And, of course, alluding to the aforementioned Nick Jackson. Clearly a player they felt would fit them very well, and he was obviously a big-time producer at Virginia. And he's proved to be an elite run defender, has had a career of great production, pretty effective pass rusher as well. Kyler Fisher was solid, either lining up at the line of scrimmage or in the slot. Plenty of depth despite some limited rotation. Guys like Carson Shar, Jaden Harrell, those are 3rd and 4th-year guys. And the thing here, Nick, is even if these players don't hit the field for a couple of seasons, they plug them right into the system, and it's almost like they were playing the whole time.
And that's what you look at with Jay Higgins, right? Higgins did not play a whole lot his freshman and sophomore year, and then his junior year only had 39 total tackles, was a solid player and showed promise, but then last year absolutely burst onto the scene. 171 total tackles, 5 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, plus a pick, 4 pass breakups. Incredible numbers. Do it all, really numbers. Just phenomenal production for Higgins. He has blossomed into a star. He could easily hit 150 again this year. I think that's certainly possible with Higgins. And when you talk about a guy they added out of the portal, Nick Jackson, the Iowa Hawkeyes don't really seem to add a lot of pieces from the portal, but they added Jackson from Virginia, who had a really good 4 years there. 3 of his 4 years, latter 3 years, sophomore, junior, and senior year at Virginia, had 100-plus tackles, and then last year 110 total tackles, 8 tackles for loss, 4 sacks in his first season up there in Iowa. Just a really incredible player, Jackson. They return him. He's a great veteran leader, has good ACC experience, and has experience in this locker room. You can't hate this group of linebackers. They're just incredible, really good athletes. Kyler Fisher is good depth with 26 total tackles, 3.5 tackles for loss, and a sack for him last year. Wow, what a phenomenal unit. One of the best in the country.
Yeah, and I think the thing about Iowa, you can kind of talk about why they don't attack the portal that much. It's just the region they recruit in. It's like, not many other high-profile schools are probably going to this kind of Midwest area recruiting these guys. No one else can really put them in the system like they can and play them to their strengths. So there's no need to attack the portal. And the players, this is a community for them. They're closest to their family, on and off the field. So there's no reason for them to depart. I think that's certainly the location for Iowa is just so beneficial when you can coach them the way they do. You look at the secondary, obviously this has been a tremendous unit. Sebastian Castro, love this guy. Moves with authority, really fights through blocks, hits with a nice thump. Pretty effective on slot blitzes. He's been such a great run defender. Nice feel and instincts in zone. Does a great job of poking the ball free as well when it comes to forcing fumbles. And overall, he was just great in coverage for them a season ago. Look at the rest of the secondary. Jamari Harris struggled a good bit, but also had some good flashes in his first year as a starter at corner. Missed, last season, but in 2021 had a good start to his career. Should blossom this fall. Deshaun Lee, in his first year of playing time, was forced to start, over last month of the season. He was targeted a good bit. Was fairly solid, so he was able to get some valuable experience. TJ Hall will rotate alongside the second-year man Josh Nestor. The safety position remains incredibly stout. Quinn Schlutt leading the way following a great season. He was consistent, does everything right, has a quick trigger in his own, takes good angles to the ball. Pretty respectable job of reading quarterback's eyes as well. And then you have an ex-5-star, Xavier Nwankpa. Obviously, a lot of people wanted him. They were able to keep the hometown kid. He should only continue to boom. He was great in coverage, has phenomenal range. Will need to be better in the tackling department, but did have a nagging injury last season. I'm a little bit worried maybe about the cornerback positions because Castro's mainly going to, anchor down that versatility slot role. Some young guys in Harrison Lee, and the depth doesn't seem to be all that proven. But this is a system where you don't seem to have too many responsibilities in that cover 2 shell, Nick. Everyone seems to help each other out to an adequate rate, and it's never really just put on too many guys unless they're drawn into, significant man coverage assignments. And that's hard to do. You remember Purdue a couple years ago, they threw for 500-plus yards on them, attacking, second-string corners and just defeating them in man coverage. You got to draw Iowa into those situations first, though.
I think you do have to draw him in. I think the cover 2 shell is really protective of this secondary and really does limit the big play potential and limit the ability to make mistakes. I think Castro is a really solid player to return at cornerback. 67 total tackles for him, 8 tackles for loss, 3 interceptions, 8 pass breakups. Really nice returning numbers there across the board. Quinn Schultz, 65 total tackles, 1 interception, 2.5 tackles for loss, 4 pass breakups. Good numbers. Jamari Harris, 42 total tackles, 8 pass breakups for him, while Xavier Nwankpa has 42 total tackles and 2 pass breakups. That is Deshaun Lee, 32 total tackles, 3 pass breakups for him as well. Solid rotational depth there. I think the secondary unit is good right there, 5th in the nation against the pass last year. Are they going to be that good this year? There might be a fall off certainly, but I still think they're a top 10 unit against the pass. This defense in general is still a top 10 defense in the country. 14.8 points per game given up last year. An incredible number when you really think about it.
They certainly over exaggerated the number a little bit. That game a couple years ago against Purdue, but nonetheless, that's certainly they can be vulnerable as in those situations. Overall, I don't expect much of a fall off, especially in terms of the numbers. But I think overall, this is a defense that is phenomenal, leading us to the verdict on this side of the ball. Hawkeyes defense was dominant as always. Might get even better as the entire linebacking group and secondary, minus Cooper DeJean, who was hurt late in the year, is back. There are some concerns regarding the depth of the interior line. This is a well-sheltered scheme, though, where one minor negative won't cause them to significantly step back. Once again, a top 5 unit in college football, and maybe even the best. And obviously, that's going to lead us to the schedule preview and prediction. Same story, new year for Iowa, but this one is a slight difference, and there is a new face in charge of the offense. And if they can stay healthy, you should see some solid improvements. And by that I mean, dead last, maybe 110th in scoring, Nick. But that's really all they need to do, right? They have a great tight end duo and McNamara behind a veteran offensive line should allow them to stay on the field a bit more as an elite defense continues to cook, but they must stay on the field longer against these elite opponents, guys like Ohio State. Pretty good schedule. I can't believe the over/under win total is only 7.5, Nick. That is incredibly juicy because this offense has always been this bad, right? I mean, that's the worst offense I've ever seen last year, and they still managed to win 10 games. They've eclipsed that number I mentioned every year since 2015, minus 2020, where we only played 8 games. They went 6-2. I'm pretty much calling that a W in that regard, Nick. 7.5 is incredibly low. Why is Vegas labeling it that much? Because this defense is probably going to be better, and I think again the offense will be a tick better at the minimum.
It's quite confusing to me because it doesn't make a lot of sense. This team outside of the COVID year, the last time they did not win over 7 games was 2012 when they went 4-8. They also won 7 games in 2014, but that would have been get you close there. Outside of that, though, they got, like I said, they have multiple 10 win or double-digit win seasons. They have 4 double-digit win seasons since 2015. They also won 8 games 3 times, won 9 games in one of those other seasons. So they're constantly winning at least 8 games a season outside of the COVID year. When you look at win percentage in the COVID year, winning their .750 winning percentage, a really solid winning percentage in that regard as well. So they are really solid across the board. You know what you can get with Iowa, right? No offense at all, incredible defense, and really good special teams. They're going to dominate in both those regards this year, in my opinion. Continue to dominate on defense, look really good on the special teams front. I like them at 10-2. I think this is just the over is easy to look at. You got to look at it and say, wow, that's a really solid thing to grab, because even if they lose 2 games here that we have them winning, you can look at maybe potentially losing at UCLA, at Maryland's another game they could lose. That still gets the over if they lose the game at Minnesota and Ohio State. I think there's a lot of wiggle room here when you look at that over. I like this team at 10-2. I think this team's going to be really solid this year and continue to win games despite their offense really hampering them and trying to hold them back.
That's another thing to mention. The schedule's not all that difficult. Even the road games they have with UCLA and Maryland, Michigan State. I mean, these aren't teams that are going to blow the world off by any means this season. I definitely see them, both of us do, losing back to back. Minnesota is always a toss up, similar style of ball. I think the Golden Gophers are good enough to get the job done in that one, though. And Ohio State, when you can't stay on the field, you're just not going to beat the Buckeyes. They're too skilled, and they're going to be able to crack your defense. And that's typically what ends up happening, especially going on the road to Columbus. I expect that one to probably be a 20 or 30 point loss for Iowa, just because the offense can't move the ball. Fairly simple schedule though. Hammer over 7.5. It's a guaranteed lock, Nick. And if it doesn't hit, I can live with that. Because I love what I see right in front of me. A+ defense, less than stellar offense. Always a fun team to watch though if you're into that style of football, Nick.
Certainly that sickos style of football. The sickos committee on Twitter loves this team, and I don't blame them. This is certainly a sickos team. Will I watch a lot of Iowa this year? Probably not, but I'm going to keep up with this team and make sure and see what they can do. I think they will get easily to 8 wins. I think the schedule is a very favorable draw. I do like what they can do this year. A very interesting team to watch in terms of the defensive side of the ball and the punting. I mean, the punting with them is phenomenal. If you really like good punting, you should watch Iowa because they're going to kick that ball deep every single damn time. A very fun and unique team in college football, in a sport that's kind of getting generic sometimes. This is a team that stands out and is very creative.
Make sure you like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.